welcome to Literal Podcast, and today we have a very special guest, teacher Frank Malgesini. Hi, teacher.
Hi, Greg.
We're very glad to have you here. We're going to ask you a couple of questions to get to know like the history of lengua inglesa more.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, especially because we are going to have the
40th
anniversary.
Yeah, actually, we already had our 40th anniversary. We just haven't celebrated it
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
yet. It would have been at the beginning of September, I think.
Oh,
But
I didn't know that.
Well, the celebration's coming up.
Yeah.
yeah, we're having the celebration in March.
March?
Yeah,
Wasn't it in November?
it was.
All right.
Things happen.
Well, an interesting question I think would be, how did you decide to come to Mexico?
In 1974, I started teaching at a school district in Washington State, in which about 50% of the population of the school were of Hispanic origin. And I didn't know Spanish. And a lot of our students had parents that didn't know English. And so I decided I needed to learn Spanish. And the summer of 1974, and then again in the summer of 1975, I went to Guadalajara. The university I graduated from in Washington, Central Washington University, had a campus in Guadalajara. And I went there for 2 years to learn Spanish. And the third year I was there, the Northwest Council of Colleges campus was in the Instituto Mexicano Norteamericano de Jalisco. And they offered me a job, so I quit my job in Sunnyside and stayed in Guadalajara for about 6 years.
It's very interesting. What made you want to stay in there? What made you stay in Guadalajara?
It was a lot of fun. and it was the largest, most modern city I'd ever been in. And it was kind of a really different experience.
And why did you decide to stay here in Chihuahua instead of Guadalajara or another city?
Well, it was kind of a roundabout thing. I left the institute temporarily in 1980 and went to Querétaro and established a certificate program for teachers of English as a second language at the Tec de Monterrey in Querétaro. And I did that for 1 year, and then I left to get my master's degree at Central Washington University. And I was going back to Guadalajara when I got my degree, but when I got there, they had several job offers for me. And the one I came to investigate was this one, because it was at the Instituto Mexicano Norteamericano de Chihuahua. And the Institutos Mexicano Norteamericanos are binational centers sponsored by the American government. And they have a lot of cultural programs and things like that. So I was kind of interested in the idea of being director of that institute. And I did that for 11 years.
And how did the journey of creating lengua inglesa start?
Well, I don't know how it started because, I have an idea, but I wasn't there. But I'd been in Chihuahua for 2 years. For 2 weeks. And it was in the end of July of 1982. And Luis Nava, who was the Secretario Académico of Philosophy and Letters at that time, brought me the program for lengua inglesa and asked me to evaluate it. And so I made an evaluation of the program. And then it started in September of that year. And there was a committee of teachers at Philosophy and Letters who made the original program. And except for Mrs. Garcia, they weren't English teachers. They were teachers from Philosophy or Letters. And Luis Nava was in charge of the discussions for making the program. The original program was nothing like lengua inglesa. For one thing, it was a language program, not a lengua inglesa program. And it was going to be teaching people English, French, and maybe German. There were like 3 languages, and they were going to have classes in those 3 languages during the 4 years, but they weren't going to be specialists in.
So it was more like diplomado?
Well, it was beyond a diplomado. I think they were going to have literature and linguistics courses too, but they weren't going to be as in-depth as Lingua Inglesa is now. And one of the recommendations I made when he brought me the program was 1 language at a time. Just start with English, and if you wanted another degree later in French or German, do that separately. Another difference in the program when it was originally presented to me was that there were 3 paths for the people graduating from the program, either to be language teachers, translators, or literature teachers. And I thought that literature teachers was not a profession. They didn't have that much need for literature teachers of English in Chihuahua. So I thought it wouldn't be a good job opportunity. I recommended that they limit it to 2, to language and to translation. Another thing that I recommended that they change, but they didn't change it because it already had this in place until the 2nd year of the program. And this is that all the literature classes started at the beginning. So like the first semester, students studied medieval literature, and the 2nd semester they moved to Elizabethan literature.
So it's chronologically?
Chronologically. And I guess that works in Spanish. I think that's the way they do it in the Spanish program. But people entering English, Lingua Inglesa for the first time are not used to studying in English. And medieval literature is the hardest one.
That's overwhelming.
And so I recommended that they change the order and put it in the other order. And start with 19th century literature, because 20th century literature is often complex beyond 19th century, and then go to 20th and then 18th and Jacobean and Elizabethan, and finish with the medieval, because by that time you're ready to study medieval, right?
And what do you like most of being an English teacher, of being a literature teacher?
You mean at Lingua Inglesa?
Yes.
Well, I think Lingua Inglesa students are different from students I've encountered at other places. I mean, I've always liked teaching. I've always liked my students. But Lingua Inglesa students are much more, they're much better students. And they're much more willing to do a lot of kinds of things. You can do lots of kinds of experimental things in Lingua Inglesa classes. And, there are many, many ways that people have taught literature classes or language classes over the years in Lingua Inglesa. Like Yolanda used to teach a short story class where she had people make movies of acting out short stories. I don't know if she still does that or not.
Teacher Cleo did it the semester I had a short story with her.
Ah, okay. Well, that's been going on for years, and lots of things like that that happen. In when I was teaching the essay class, was it the essay class? No, it was the novel class to the 2nd generation. We made a movie of Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts. And when I was teaching the short story class, we made a movie of The Chaser, with the whole class was involved in making it. And those kinds of things are fun, I think. And
yes, that sounds fun. I mean, I really enjoy those type of activities and everything. They seem really enjoyable. I mean, they're fun, and also it's like you can see the passion of the students there and the teacher's passion as well.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about Lingua Inglesa is the history classes. We battled a long time with history classes because we had history teachers who taught dates and things like that, and
timelines and everything, isn't it?
And I always thought that they weren't going to get enough history classes in Lingua Inglesa to be memorized the whole history of, and so I always argued for taking certain moments and going into depth in those moments instead of talking about everything. And I think the first time that's actually been done well is when Lisette took over the class. And Lisette does lots of things like that too with history, the same kind of things that Yolanda or Mauro did with literature.
Yeah, I think in one of the first podcasts we asked the people that were invited to the podcast, which was their favorite subject, and most of them answered. I think we gave them and I think all of them chose history.
Oh, really?
Yeah, history.
Teacher
Lucila.
Teacher
Yes, because it's like gossiping and everything. And it's really fun.
And that's really interesting because the early generations hated history. but it was because they were teaching it really differently.
Yes, because for example, I remember that when I was taking history, but like Mexican history classes, it was super boring because it was just like doing timelines and everything, and nobody was explaining. So for me, it was super boring. But now that I came here, it's super exciting having like history classes specifically because I never heard about American history or British. So I found it very interesting because I felt like sometimes I was reading more like a book instead of a textbook. Yeah.
One of the things I tried to do with the essay class, which is the first semester in English, is I grouped the essays to focus on one moment in history. And so I had the London, which was talking about Sir Walter Raleigh and his contemporaries, and Appomattox, which was Grant and the people around Grant, and Paris, which was the writers in Paris in the 1920s, and Detroit, which was Henry Ford, and by focusing on one thing, I mean, I was trying to make people familiar with one moment in American or English history, and the method I was trying to use was I had the central essay, and then all these other paragraphs and things were about the same moment, but they were saying something different because it was different people writing and the contemporaries themselves speaking, and I think that kind of brings it to life, and it's a lot more interesting than memorizing dates. And
yes, and also like, for example, I remember that I had to make a video, like a representation or a play about a certain moment in time.
Yeah, I think that's because you took that class in pandemic.
Yeah. And I remember that I made Al Capone with teddy bears. And it was like, I had like a teddy bear being Al Capone and like big gun. And no, it was about everything. And it was super funny because they seemed like very cute, but at the same time with the dialects very violent. So, yeah, but I enjoy a lot that activity.
I actually did the video on the same time event of Al Capone, and I portrayed him. I put on my dad's blazer and then a hat, and I was like talking with a fake Italian accent, and then Emily was interviewing me to tell the story. Yeah, it was really funny.
Imagine I was Al Capone, and I was like, oh my god, and trying to make like a more male voice or more so and I ended up like very exhausted, but it was really fun.
About 10 years ago, or maybe 11, this group of people from that class were going around school in their black suits and black hats and their machine guns, arresting the teachers and threatening them with things and stuff. And but yeah, I think that's a popular unit because people, you see people every year dressed up like gangsters from the 20s.
Yeah, I think most people enjoyed that class.
Yes. And which has been your favorite class to teach here in Inglesa?
That's not really a very fair question because all the classes I teach, I invented. And so I like them all. And I kind of like starting about, I guess like 30 years ago or so, I started teaching optativas too. Before I only had the obligatory classes because, well, we had a lot of classes. But starting with the second, with the poetry optativa, was the first optativa I taught, and then a little while later, I did a short story optativa, and then I did Joyce Carol Oates, and now I teach an optativa every semester, and I really like the optativas. But I've always, the other classes, the basic essay and short story and novel and poetry, I like all of those too. I thought they were all, and since I made the programs, I get to read what I like to read.
It's like picking your favorite child.
Yeah.
Very hard.
How has your experience in Chihuahua been?
Can you specify?
Like your personal experience, how do you like the city and also like teaching here? Do you find it different from the other parts in Mexico where you taught?
I find it different, but that's partly because in Guadalajara and Querétaro, mostly I was dealing with language students. And here, students already know language. They're taking other classes there. And so, well, the classes are more fun because the students already are not... Yeah. I mean, teaching English is fun too for a while, but after a while, it's more fun to teach other kinds of things, I think, using English. And so yeah, I think lingua inglesa has been probably more fun than teaching it. But I always enjoyed teaching. I mean, all the classes I've had in other places too, but I really like classes here.
It's really clear that you have a passion for teaching.
I don't remember a time when I didn't want to be a teacher. I mean, when I was in first grade, I wanted to grow up to be a teacher. So yeah, that's what I always was planning to do.
Well, it turned out really well. You're an icon.
What?
You're an icon.
Oh, that's like when you say you're very old, right?
No.
No. It's because you have, like, you created all those programs. And I think it's something that no one can do, like,
by themselves.
Yeah, it's like sometimes we struggle even with a lesson plan. I mean, imagine creating a whole program.
Well,
and it is like they are really good programs because I've seen from other majors or from majors that are very similar to this one but are not that good, and you're very passionate because, well, I mean, I only been in one of your classes, but I really like it, and I enjoy your class, and it's like reading is fun, and in the way that you develop your class and everything, it's like a talking, or I don't know, like very
conversation with a friend.
Yeah, conversation more than just having, I don't know, like
to do an assignment of what you read.
Yeah.
I think lingua inglesa is different from any other major at the university and probably at other universities around the country too. And there are a couple of things that I wanted to do from the beginning, and I think lots of people felt the same way. And like the teachers we have now, I think they all have kind of the same viewpoint. But first of all, teachers in lingua inglesa already know how to speak English. So they don't have a problem discussing their ideas in English. So the important thing in class is to make sure the students are speaking. And so the teacher should shut up as much as they can. I'm not very good at that sometimes, but who we want to have expressing ideas and making arguments is the students. And so our classes tend to be more discussion than in any other school in the university, I think. And when lingua inglesa started, bachilleres was a lot different than it is now. And students came into lingua inglesa less prepared than they are now. Because Bachilleres teachers tended, like when they were teaching literature, they tended to tell the students what the book was about. Sometimes they didn't even read the book; they just told them what the book was about. Yes. Yeah, the summary, and
or like the short versions, like the short.
Yeah. and then students were accustomed to taking tests where they put down what the teacher told them on the test. And in my classes, and I think in lots of other teachers' classes too, we try not to tell the students what we think until after they say what they think, because the students need to get experience in developing their own ideas. And 40 years ago, students coming into the university didn't have a lot of experience developing their own ideas, because in bachilleres, teachers kind of told them this is true and this is false, and things like that. And so that was one of the things that we focused on a lot, especially in the early years, was making students independent and making them capable of expressing their ideas. And if you're going to be a professional when you leave the program, you need these 4 years of experience of asserting your own ideas and developing your ideas. And so if teachers are always telling you what you should think about something, you're not going to have a chance to develop your own thinking and your own arguing ability when you want to present your ideas to other people. So that's one thing that's a basic thing of lingua inglesa, I think. And a second thing that has to do with the administration of the university is there are teachers of tiempo completo and teachers hora clase. And teachers hora clase get a really rotten deal at this, I think, all Mexican universities. And all the teachers at lingua inglesa for a few years were hora clase because they said that it was a temporary program. But when we started, some of us getting tiempos completos, we tried to make sure that the classes of the hora clase teachers were protected, and we tried to make sure that they were included in all the decisions and things like that, so that it was like, I think some of here in philosophy and letters, and I think in the rest of university too, some of the majors kind of are run by the tiempo completo teachers. And we try to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to make the decisions and things like that. And so we kind of treat the Academy of Lingua Inglesa like a family. Feels like a family. And then the students, we don't take an attitude so much as teaching things to students, but as working together to figure things out. Like, and you notice in classes when you're discussing in different classes that lots of times somebody has an idea and the teacher thinks, wow, that's a really good idea. I never thought of that, because, we don't know all the answers. And if the teacher isn't learning from the students, he's probably not teaching the students anything either, right? So kind of lingua inglesa, I think, is more of a collaborative project between the students and the teachers and everybody together than it is like a traditional school where there's a teacher who tells you what's right and students that are evaluated according to how well they can repeat what the teacher said or something like that.
Yes, because, for example, my friends always tell me, like, how can you study, like, English or literature or something if they are boring classes? And I'm like, no, here are not boring. Here are very fun. Here are funny. Here are, like, I can feel comfortable and also listen by my teachers. It's not the same as in your school or something. Mm-hmm. And they tell me about other teachers or their teachers that are not that involved with them, or that sometimes never appear in the class. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I feel very fortunate for that. Very lucky.
Yeah, I think it does really feel like a family, because I used to study architecture before I came to lingua inglesa, and you feel just like a number, and they're like just another person in the list, and they like just tell you what to do, and they don't care like if you have any ideas to like make the assignment better, or if you have any questions, like they answer them in class, but they don't care like really about the students. They just go to teach the class and then leave. So it's really noticeable.
One of the things that happens in lingua inglesa that you don't know about because it doesn't show, but like some semesters, lingua inglesa chooses their students, and sometimes in certain administrations, we've had to accept everybody. But no matter who comes into lingua inglesa, our idea is that they're all going to be successful in lingua inglesa. And if somebody's having problems in the classes or has some special thing come up or things like that, we talk about it in the academy meetings, or we talk about it on our academy post. And sometimes if we think one person is more likely to be able to help than somebody else, we decide who's going to talk to the person, who's going to work with them on that. But we try, and they have a tutoring system now at the university, but we had an informal tutoring system since 40 years ago, and we would agree on somebody taking responsibility for somebody if they had some kind of problem coming up, and we would be kind of always trying to be aware of anything that might be bothering a student, or why a student didn't do as well this semester as he was doing in the past, or what happened with this and things like that. So I think that on the whole, we've been able to, help students get through problems when they come up a lot during the course of their 4.5 years they're with us.
Yeah, I think students are really comfortable talking to some teachers, even if they are not their tutors.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really easy to go to some teacher that you have, you feel comfortable with them, and telling them your problems, and see how they can help you, or if they can give you just a word of advice.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question that is not in the list, but have you ever translated?
Ceci Villarreal and Ruben Alvarado and I spent 2 years working on a book that was written by a friend of mine in Yakima, Washington, who has a publishing company, and it was called Whole House is Shaking. And there was a competition for publication in 2000, I think, and we submitted it and won. And the book was published by the state of Chihuahua, by the Centro Cultural. It's called Casas Enteras Temblando. And then I asked Ivan to work with me on this, and Ivan and I spent about a year working on the poems of Luis Nava. And with Jim Bodine, we translated into Spanish. With Luis Nava, we translated into English. And that book was published by the university. I have these two things that I'm really interested in translating, but I need, and I've talked to Ivan about them, but we need a French person and a Dutch person to work with us. One of them is this medieval Dutch play, which is about this person that gets really upset and sells her soul to the devil, and then the whole process. And it's kind of like a miracle play. And the other one is this ancient French play that they found a copy of at the beginning of the 20th century in an attic in England. That's by an author that nobody's ever heard of before. And it's called Patience. And it's this woman whose father is a lord, and only his son can inherit his property, and he doesn't have a son. And so from the time she's born, he dresses her like a boy so nobody will know. And it deals with lots of problems with unequal rights, which I think is a very interesting thing, because this is like 1,000-year-old play.
So it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, probably so.
Well, I have a question, but it's not about these questions that we bro, do you think that Duncan?
Oh no!
Do you think
Oh no, Greg.
that
I know.
Duncan is really smart? Because I remember we had a discussion like a couple of weeks ago about this question that I said that I didn't think that.
We are going to the latest part, right?
Well,
Who did you have a discussion with?
Oh, with you and some other classmates, and I said that Duncan was not that smart. That like he had good grades because he had the imposter syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else said that he was indeed smart because he had good grades. So I want to ask you, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think Duncan was smart.
I think.
What do you think?
I think he was just like
Overcompensating.
having good grades doesn't mean that you're very smart or intelligent.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's people who doesn't have those good grades and everything, but they are very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they are very intelligent, even more intelligent than people who's studying. Because, for example, I have an uncle who is really good in technology and everything since he was like 5 years old. Like he took the clocks and took them and then repaired them when he was 5. And I remember that my grandma was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm fixing the same clock that I broke or something." And he did it. And he never liked school. And he never studied like an engineer or something. But he's really good at his job. He's mechanical and everything. And sometimes students go with him like to learn, but he's like, "I'm not a teacher. I'm not going to teach you. I mean, I do it by my own." So, and also my grandpa is like that. He fixed like all these bakery machines, but like industrials, very big ovens, like that there can be like in a complete room, and sometimes they send students to learn and everything. And he was like, "I'm not going to teach you because you're younger." Yeah, he was like, "I don't want you to take my job because you're younger and you're studying. You're supposed to learn by school, not by me." Yeah, but he was very smart, and sometimes he left some of them, but sometimes he didn't because he never like because sometimes they were very bad mood people, like, "I know more than you because you never study." And he was like, "Prove me wrong. I mean, you can fix that machine or something, do it by yourself." And they were like struggling and everything. And he was like, "Come on." And he never studied like more than high school. I think he didn't study high school. He was just like middle school or something.
Yeah, my grandpa too, he just finished middle school and he went on to teach elementary school for like a couple of years, and then he wrote some books. He wrote the last one he wrote was about cooking. Oh yeah, he's like, he really likes reading, so I think you'll get along pretty well.
That's he wrote books and they got published.
One of them.
Wow. So
I think he wrote another one, but he hasn't taken it to a publishing company.
Yeah, that's not just anybody. Lots of people write books, but not a lot of people get them published. So that's pretty outstanding to start with.
Yeah, I'll bring you one if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
in conclusion, Albert Einstein said that everybody loves learning until the school messes it up.
I agree with you. Because I remember that I always had good grades, like from elementary school to like junior high, and then when I entered high school, like a lot of teachers like were like not really good teachers, so I really like stopped liking like studying. But I liked it again when I came to English.
With me happened the opposite. I was like in elementary school, like a very bad student. I was like, I mean, I had some personal problems and everything, And also I had teachers who bullied me and say that I was stupid and a lot of things because I was a really quiet child and I didn't like to participate. And now I'm very I'm very talkative. But I remember that once I had a teacher in middle school and he was like, you can do everything if you want to, and that provide me like more self-esteem and everything. And I started to I turned from having like passing grades only, like I only 6 or 7s, or yeah, I was like not that good, a brilliant student, to being like with really good grades. Like once I had like 9.9 average and everything, and since then I'm like in that rhythm, but without stressing a lot. Like take it easy, just doing what I need to do and pay attention to everything.
That's really interesting, right? Like
Yeah.
how different school feels when you like it. Because the highest grade I had it last semester, and it didn't really feel like when my mom made me study. Like she would ask me the questions of the study guide, and I would feel like really stressed. And now, while I really enjoy most of my classes, it doesn't feel that much.
Yes, and sometimes
It doesn't put that much of a toll on me.
Sometimes you don't need to study that hard. It's like just reading your notes or something and then be prepared for the next day, like mentally prepared.
The only exam I've studied for this semester was like teacher Egoist semester. Teacher Egoist exam.
I'm gonna have to talk with some of my colleagues, because that's not the way it's supposed to be here.
No, but I really enjoy her class too, because it's literature. I really like Beowulf.
Yeah, but you're supposed to be really busy all afternoon.
Well, maybe I'm a bad boy.
The second generation of lingua inglesa, one of the students toward the end of the semester said, all lingua inglesa is read, write. Which
was wrong.
It's kind of true.
Yeah.
I mean, at home, that's what it is.
It's funny because I have friends who are studying like, it looks like harder majors, but they don't have like, they are not spending their afternoons doing their homework or something, and they're like, oh, it's very hard. I mean, I have to do like one task or something, and I'm like, really? About what? And like just some problems, but there are like 5, and like chemistry problems or something. And I'm like, oh my god! But are they long? And they're like, no, they're not. And they say like, what about you? And I'm like, write like an essay, and then another essay, and then write a short story, and then
wait till you have translation classes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because that's what it's hard about the major, I think. Because the rest of it is like really enjoyable, but what gets me is that we have a lot of assignments, and it's not even finals yet.
Students used to complain sometimes about why were they always so busy, and they looked at philosophy and letters and ciencias, and they were standing around the hallway all the time. They were never in class. And I said, yeah, but when you graduate, you're going to get jobs, and they aren't.
Like law students, they don't really get assignments. They just have to memorize law and do the oral exams.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I've had a couple of relatives, and also Angie has a couple of friends that graduated from law school. And in law school, lots of semesters they never meet the professor.
Yeah, I've heard that they never go to class. They just tell them what they have to learn. And they meet at the end of the semester or every exam period. Well, we still have 15 minutes. So
aren't they going to close? Like,
we can wrap it up now, and we can have another episode with you if you are able to. All right. Well, how does You have any other questions?
Probably for part 2.
Well, I have another question. Oh, I had it in my mind. I forgot it.
I have some about literal ink.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask
yeah.
about literal ink. Like, why did you decide to support the project?
Okay, Literal Ink was it sometime in 1999, I think. A few students, and the two I remember most are Ivan and Hervé, started talking about doing a journal, and they had some other journals. The students in Letters had a journal. They have them every so often, but they only last 1 or 2 issues. But so we started talking about it, and a little group got together, and we gathered materials, and we put together the first issue. Then I don't remember how we did it for the first issue, but those first 5 issues at least, we had to pay for it all, and so we had to get the money. The first one, I don't remember how we did it, but the second one, we sold the issues, and so we were able to print the second one, and then when we sold the second one, we were able to print the third one, and so on until we printed 5 of them. And then the 6th and 7th issues turned out very badly. That was about when I was leaving for Arizona, and Io Mauro was the editor of one of them, and Joy was an editor of the other one. And the computer we had all the material in crashed, and we lost all the material.
What year was that?
That would have been 2005. And so then there were no literal inks until after I came back. And then we had about 6 or 7 more. And I think the first one we were still paying for, and then the school agreed to print a certain number of copies, and then we used the money we got for selling them to buy the paper and to have them bound and the other things, but the school printed. And then the ones we've made over the last 5 or 6 years, more or less, we've never been able to print because the school said they couldn't spare the. They only had enough material to print a certain number of pages a semester, and that it was too much. So we've had them, and I don't know if they're all there, but we have several on the site that have never been printed. Actually, we just
like the horror issue.
Like
no horror issue.
The first horror issue was printed, sold out, and I think what
the movies issue was the one.
The movies issue never got printed.
Yeah, that one, because I know that the horror issue was printed just once, and they sold out, but never printed again, right?
Never printed again. And that was our most popular. It was the fastest to sell out issue.
We should have printed it and sold it when we did the horror movie festival.
Yeah.
We missed up on that. You guys should do it next year.
But I think because of the horror festival, we now have money enough to print it. So probably that's a problem.
When we were printing them in the beginning of this century, we always printed 1,000 copies because it cost almost as much to print 100 copies as it did 1,000 copies. Anything less than 1,000, the price per copy went up for each lower number. And now I think that it's possible to print a smaller number without having the price go up so much.
I think we're going to print like 60.
60?
Right? Or 80.
Yes, 60, I think.
You should do 100.
Well, I think 60. That's all the money we collected.
Yes. It's because they say that after the pandemic and everything, as everything stopped, it was harder to print. And to have the money to print.
Yeah. Yes. So, isn't it really expensive to print 80? Or they do printing differently now, don't they?
I think they do. That's why we're able to print like 80 or 60.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's time to wrap it up. So I just want to thank you for coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
I think it was our most interesting podcast, and we hope we can have you later.
Thank you.
Yes, it was really fun.
Thank you guys for listening, and we just want to thank Teacher Ivan for arranging all of this and Campo Virtual for letting us record here. And we hope you can listen to the next podcast.
And buy bookmarks, please, any shoes.
Yeah, we need the money.